Right, so we've got some, I think I called it a string of spring flowers. I think one of the beautiful things about this time of the year is that you do get this combination of like I suppose our natural plants that grow like bluebells and primula, um, are on what we would call strings, aren't they? Literally, lily of the valley is another one, isn't it? But where you get these lovely just clumps, natural clumps coming up, and they are like without leaves, so they're quite, I don't really think that there's another time of year where you get so many flowers like that are quite natural that have got so few leaves on. Because obviously all the leaves are generally right at the bottom of the stem. So when we pull them out or we cut them, we tend not to get the leaf with it. I mean, obviously pansies are gorgeous for this time of year as well. So I've got a combination. I'm going to use a combination. I've got some watercolor pencils, and I've also got just my paints as well to have a go with. I'll move those down in a mo. So you can use them you can use watercolors obviously on their own, or you can use a combination of the pencil. Sometimes when you've got like very delicate areas, it's quite nice actually to use watercolor pencils because you can really get in there. One of the things to think about really tonight, whatever we're doing, is with the watercolor, if you wanted to use all watercolor pencils, then we were thinking about pressure, aren't we? So I'll just do a little quick demo on here. So if we use, to get a really good coverage across the watercolor paper, if we want to use a very dark color, we obviously need to apply more pressure. So the difference between that and that, we still need to kind of get a little bit into the grain if we want to, even if we want it less. And then obviously after that, we can go in and loosen that off. Now, whilst it's wet, we can also move that colour around as well. Just do it quite quickly whilst it's there. Or for example here, where it's really dark because we've put a lot of pressure on, we get that much darker effect. And again, it's really nice, but I'm moving that around whilst I can. If you want to take colour out, you can just dry out, kind of clean your brush and then just take strips out like that, but you'll have to do it quite quickly, especially the warmer the room that you're in. At the moment it's getting warmer, isn't it? It just starts to dry really fast. So if you did want to take out some of the darker colours, then that's fine. So again, with pencils, what we can do is also layer up. So it might be that you think, oh, I want to get like more of a bluey tone. I've got my purple. And again, it's worth trying these out first on a separate piece of paper, so you can work out what those colour combinations will be. I mean, that's very dark actually, isn't it? So I would know maybe that's a bit too dark, but I might put a little bit of this kind of a blue overlap with purple elsewhere, or I might just try much more purple in there. But this is why, this experimental side, or I'll try a lighter blue. I've got a bit less in as well. And depending on which view of it's still quite intense actually, isn't it? So yeah, so I mean, just by this experimental bit, we're getting quite a lot from it as well. You can also take bits out with a cotton bud, get a bit of a little bit of rolled up kitchen roll, etc. Just, if you're wanting to not have such an intense colour and everything. But if we kind of start to really work out what colours we want before, then an overlap and things like that, then we've got more of an idea before we actually put them down on the paper, because often they do come out very differently, do pencils. And then you can just use a combination of the watercolors as well. I mean, one of the things obviously is, if we were doing this just in pure watercolors, then we would go do the lightest ones first on there once we've sketched it out. And then what we would do is then we'd pop the dark ones in. Now, if you're doing it with pencil, you may want to, sometimes people like to color, color the whole thing in with the lights and then the darker ones. you might want to just set the light one first to make sure it doesn't run in, or you might want to just kind of let colours run in. So again, there's this huge variety of, you know, do I want more tight and detailed, or do I want to go really loose and just kind of wet the paper and pop the paint in as I go and let it bleed. So I would say the more practice you can do, like just like trying things out on your scrap bit of paper with the watercolors, the better, especially if you want to let things bleed into them, the colours. And also thinking about the colours. So of course we can't use white watercolor over the top of another darker color, so that's why I've got to get the white ones in first and like paint around the white areas. Otherwise we won't be able to go over, but we can use white. You know, we do have things like white pencils and stuff like that. So again, if I was just going in with this color, this is more of a blue, it'll just make things more pastel-y and changes the tone of the color. Same with the normal white watercolor. People often say, well, what do I do with the white one? And it's just there, you know, it just makes a more, I would say, pastel-y tone, doesn't it? That's really kind of quite pastel-y. So we can use the white to effect, we just can't put it over the top of anything. So we need to make sure that we leave these areas of white or any highlights out there. So again, with drawing out, you can draw them out, or you can literally just, if you're feeling brave enough, you can literally just start to pop the shapes in. Personally, I like to just get in some of the stems with a pencil, but again, you want to do that really lightly, because what you probably don't want is the pencil coming through, and it does do that. So I find it easy to pop stems in just because everything comes off the stem. But you want to make sure that if you're doing a pencil drawing, make sure it's really light coloured. Mine will definitely show through some of those colours, but if I don't do it, you won't be able to see what I'm doing. So I do need to show you via a demo. Yeah, so I'm popping the stem in just so I know where it is. But as I said, you can literally go in and go drop, drop, and create the shapes, lift out colour, etc. really quickly, or you can take your more time on it. So I'm just kind of drawing in off this stem. That's why I quite like the stems as well, because it gives you a, you know, a kind of a framework in which these lovely bells come off. But I'm going to just do a little bit of each actually. So I might not do a full painting, I might do 2 areas and just treat these as like nice little studies, because really that's what we're doing. When we were looking at the flowers and stuff, we will really study the tone and the colours, you know, because there's so much, you know, they're very fragile, aren't they? Very delicate, but there's an awful lot going on in there. There's all sorts of, you might see things that are a bit more blue, purple, you might even see some pinks. The stems are fantastic because you've got these lovely colours, and when you really start to look, you start to see all sorts of colours in here. So you might, I think some of these stems really, you almost get like a purpley pink in them sometimes, and then you've got these different varieties of green. So again, you can bring those colours in when you're doing it into your stems and things like that. So I'm not going to do those pink ones. I'm just going to do these purples. Yeah, in terms of pink though, actually, just have a little think once you start experimenting and mixing. You might have a pink pencil, so that'd be fine. But in terms of mixing pink with watercolor, I think I might have mentioned this before. Sometimes you get a completely different pink depending on the red that you use, if you're mixing a red and a white together, for example. So if you've got a very warm red that's like Acadian red with more yellow in, it may be more peachy based when you add your white. So just see what happens. And like your traditional, like a traditional red will give you more of a pink, you know, as I say traditional, but you know, like more of a, you know, just an ordinary red. What's this one? Yeah, so they're quite, yeah, that's more blue. So when I'm talking about red, you know, these two reds, that's more blue base, it's got more blue in it, so it's a bit darker. So sometimes again, that might give you a different effect with it. So it's definitely worth trying out. If you've got two reds, trying out which one makes the pink that you want, and just really kind of think about that when you're doing pinks as well, because sometimes it doesn't, you know, it just works out like that. So yeah, and then we've got these wonderful primula as well, haven't we? So again, I find it quite helpful just to get the stem into place. But as I said, you might not even want to draw, and you might want to just go straight in and just drop kind of shapes, because again, we can make this really as loose or as tight as you want to. It's totally down to you, because you're the artist. It's your decision entirely. I can't quite see what's going on with there. But we do have these very delicate, don't we, little. But then we have all these wonderful, you know, darker tones within the centers and things like that, that kind of bring in the shapes. So once we start, we can use tone for effect. So if we put the darker tones obviously in the middle, like we know the rule, don't we? It works for everything that darker colours recede. So it will make those feel like they're going inwards. So yes, we can start to pop in some of these. I mean, I think one of the things is, if you really love drawing, you know, sometimes it's just nice to carry on with the watercolors. But if you're just really drawn to using a brush, you'll end up putting a mix in of these, and you might want to do less drawing. So it's just kind of trial and error, really. See what you fancy. As I said, there's so many styles of watercolor, from very loose to much tighter, and unless you have a go, you're not going to know which it is that you really like to do. We've got some more of these kind of trumpet ones here. And you could do a combination. You could do it like one that's a bit more tight and, you know, tighter and neater, and then another one you could just go for it and just kind of get the just general shapes in. See how you feel as you go. I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to make this one a bit more loose, but I'm going to go a bit tighter with this one, because there's a bit more kind of, I'll have to be quite delicate with that. Okay. Well, it's just a lovely arrangement, isn't it, really? Nice. I'm making this up. I'm shifting this one up. This is what I like about choosing. We can just choose what we fancy. I'm moving this one over this stem. And, you know, it's a really nice one, because you just totally get so absorbed into it. Lovely. Get really pulled into all the observation and the shapes. So I'm just going to shift this one along, and I'm going to just do a little bit. I'll keep this a bit looser. So, you know, one of the things is looking at, like, this one obviously is lighter. There are darker areas in it. So once we get going, we'll know to, like, make these much darker ones a bit later. But this has got very white area, hasn't it, around the side. But yeah, you can just have a go at making this a bit looser if you want to, or not. But we've got all these real variations of dark, very dark and big contrast in here, which does really help. But I mean, there's no, you know, you can do one and focus on one, or you can kind of swap and change a little bit. I probably will pop just this in, just so that I've got to remember to leave this out. I'm not very good at remembering to leave the white out always. I seem to be the person who does a lot of lifting out of the colour that I've put over the top. So I'll just make a visual marker for myself where this is. I'm going to go around with this. And just kind of get some of these lovely shapes in, really. That's what they are, is a series of really lovely shapes. But we've got to look at it like. And then there's another one overlapping there. So just such marvellous, amazing shapes, aren't they? It was just, you just forget how, I just feel so in awe at this time of the year, because there's just so many beautiful flowers, and I just look at them and I think, how is that like that? It's just wonderful. You know, they are like something out of this world, aren't they? Sometimes when you look at these, you think, wow. And we admire them, don't we, when they're in our pots and everything. We think, oh yeah, they're lovely. But when you really start looking at them, it's like amazing. Absolutely amazing. There we go. Might just do a few leaves in. Sometimes it's difficult to see what's going on here with these leaves, and that's fine. Just kind of focus on the tones and the shapes, and that will help. I'm only going to stop there though, because I think that's going to confuse me a little bit too much. So I'm just going to stick with some of the petals to start with, and then I'll work in my leaf afterwards. And I think that's a good key. So if when you're doing things, you think, oh, I'm really losing track where I am, just stop, do that bit, and then come back to it. Okay, so let's have a little look. So I would like this, but not so dark, so I need to overlap a little bit. So in terms of like applying the colours on the flower, it's just like you can sketch the whole thing in first if you want to. You just have to be mindful, I would say. So I'm just going to obviously I'm going to leave, I'm going to make it slightly darker in little patches where I can see it's darker, but I'm just going to make sure that I leave areas that are very light. I'm just going to see, I might even go in with just a slightly pinky tone there. Sometimes when you've got all this going on, it can be, it's quite overwhelming in terms of, where do I leave this and where do I leave that? I just wouldn't worry about it too much, but just put some blue areas in. And you can always try one, or you can draw one on a bit of card. I'm kind of looking, thinking this goes, I've got some on the outside here. And then just like a little bit of, we're not going to know really. So if you want to fix it in place, you like coloured ones first, that's fine. So I'm just going to get the little brush. So I'm just going to avoid a little bit. Just avoid my really dark areas. But I'm also, whilst I'm doing it, I'm lifting it out, because when you first start doing this, you don't know how much to put on. So I'm going to pop that on there. Now, again, depending on the room that you're in, some of this might dry really quick and some might not. And you might be okay with it bleeding in a little bit, but you might not. So if you do one and it starts kind of bleeding into the light areas and you don't want it to, then just wait until it's fully dry. I quite like it to bleed in a little bit on the flowers, I have to admit, because they do sometimes look a bit like that, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to get some of these colours that I can see in. I'm just working in the darker ones now because I've not done the others. just wherever I can see, you know, a bit more of a. And again, you know, whilst it's still wet, if you need to take anything out, then do it whilst it's wet. You know, or if you want it to spread a little bit more, just add a little bit of water. And then just see, you know, go from there with each of those. And what we'll do is we'll end up like changing slightly anyway with what we're doing, because you just get a little bit more used to using them. So I'm going to definitely go in just some little pinky areas here. Now, you could do that and set it, but you're going to have to wait quite a while for that to dry. But if you feel like you've got more control leaving that and then leaving it dry, the only problem can be is if you go back and it's wet, you can end up scrubbing off the surface with the pencil. But as long as you're prepared to wait for it to dry a bit, that's absolutely fine. I'm just happy to just pop these different colours in, to be fair. So I'm just looking at like the dark bits on there, you know, at the top. And the same, you know, like if you're doing this in acrylics, just make sure that you don't put the shadow on last. I know we're doing the shadow last, but then because that will weigh it down, you know, it makes it a little bit dark, doesn't it, sometimes, putting the shadow on last and can flatten the shape a bit. You can see, you know, where you get these little ends of shadows or whether it's lighter. When you start really looking in there, it's like, oh yeah, I like that. That's all we can do is just work our way through it really and just think, you know, have a little experiment. It's very long time since anyone's used them. You know, it's like coming back to something again, isn't it? We just get, you know, we're just having a play until we get familiar with our materials, really, is what we're doing. Sometimes with watercolor pencils, it's making sure you've got enough on. Enough water, sorry. And you can just water some bits and leave the others almost like, you know, as they are. So that's fine as well. Watercolor pencils, you don't have to wet every single bit. Just, you know, pick key areas out. You don't always know till we get going with it, really. It's a bit more flat at the top. I'm just gonna gently do that so I don't disturb the top. And again, we're looking at the colour of the stem. Pinky. It'll be one of those things where we're all seeing those different colours again, which is just really nice. You very much get lost in this, which is fabulous. I think it's really, we're looking at so much detail, really getting lost in the detail, which is that's very enjoyable. I'll do this with any flowers. Okay, so we're just working our way along with those, really, building those lovely colours up. Bluebells are amazing anyway. Sometimes they look really purple and sometimes they look really blue, depending on the light that they're in. And also, if we've got any areas of light, just remembering those as well. Yeah. What we're doing is we're learning about the pressure of pencils as well. You know, how much pressure. Sometimes we just can't make the colour with the pencils that we've got as well. And you can think, well, it's a bit like pastels. Do I go for a near fit? Do I overlap? You know, we're just making those decisions all the time. It may well be that, you know, we end up adding in a little bit of something. And you can go through, you know, and colour all of them in first and then, you know, do the water on all of them. A lot of people like to do that, or you can just do one little step at a time. That's entirely up to you, how you do it. Sometimes I will work through like a process of doing all of it. And then other times I might think, oh, actually, you know what, I'd quite like to see a little bit done today. So I think that's just down to kind of as artists, we work, you know, how we want to work on that particular day, how we're feeling. And it's fine, there's no like right or wrong to that at all. As long as you've got a system that's helping you, you know, keep going with it, that's the main thing. One of the things I think people feel about them sometimes when they're doing this is that they're a bit, you know, they can't get the definition, but what you can do is we would darken things anyway. So if you know, put more shadow in, for example, we can do that, you know, as we go in. It feels like there's no, you know, you want to get a bit more contrast or whatever, we can always darken things. It's just difficult to lighten them with watercolours. Remember, you can take things out if it's too dark. Here comes the challenge, because I've just I've just realised I'm looking at a completely different bluebell on here. I'm doing this one, but actually this is the one that's on here. So easy to lose track of where you actually are, isn't it? I wonder if I've confused myself. But just, yeah, just really enjoy spending some time doing that. Really nice to stop and get pulled into having a little look at these lovely shapes. So I've just popped a bit, a tiny bit in whilst the other bit's still wet. But I've just got to be careful not to tear the paper, that's the biggest thing, really. Where are they doing these or the pansies? It's just got so many lovely, you just start to observe all these lovely patterns in them.
Becky, can I ask a question about the
Just press pause a moment, hang on. Okay. Have a chat. So we just keep kind of working through what you've got and just observing those colours. You know, and if you have got any very light areas, just leave them. And then, you know, you can do the same on the stems. You can do the different tones if you've got the right colours. And again, we'll just be testing out with that. I'm going to go this yellowy green, but then there's other colours almost like, you know, is it pink? Is it purple? And again, you might not quite have the right colour that you want. So I'm just going to test this. If not, you know, go in with your watercolour. That was quite nice and warm. So I might use a bit of that where it's more yellowy down here, although it looks, I could almost use it a bit yellowy. So here, I'll just start to kind of overlap. Get some of this colour in down here that's a bit yellowy green, but might even pop a bit of that yellow in. And test it out first if you're not, you know, if you wanted to test it out, that's fine. And then, you know, it's almost kind of a slightly greeny, greeny purpley up here. But I'm going to use my, just move this stuff down to see. I'm going to go into using my paints because slightly different colour in there. This one's more alizone, crimsony one. I haven't got that anything near that colour. So I'm going to use that one as a dark area. So I'm just going to kind of work this in first. But that, you know, obviously you can move those colours up a bit. I'm going to go more green here. And as it gets to the top, it's getting quite dark up there. So all the time we're making, you know, making those decisions about what colour it is. Again, here it's probably a bit too vibrant. So I'm going to take out a bit of that colour I've just put in there. Let's see. I'm going to go a little bit more. Yeah, just kind of going darker as we're going up the top here, but it's just this, you know, we're just observing, aren't we, what we see really. And then I'm going to go in with this different kind of pinky. Go on the inside, and again, it might, you know, you might want it to bleed in a little bit, and you might not. So again, it's just thinking, how dry do you want that? And you get that nice shadow side here. Yeah. Which even creates a little bit of depth in the stem as well, which is lovely. And then you're kind of looking around at what you've got. So I'm going to go even more dark purple over here on top. Excuse me. Let's move the water, they're not blocking the screen. Yeah, making it dark at the top. So yeah, so we just, you know, that's just kind of combination really, but you can, it's just having a go with different materials, I think is the key really. And obviously we've got all the nice yellow ones here. So again, you can try the ones that you've got in your kit. You know, try and see which is the best yellow. You'll see like some flowers are very lemony and acidic, like that. Which this isn't. These are much warmer. Primroses are really Primulas, aren't they, actually, and are much warmer. Like that, but then you've got to think, well, what colour am I going to use for the centre? What have I got? You know, is it orange? Is it red? And again, just making those decisions. I think I'm going to go for a warmer yellow. Looks like a Canadian yellow to me. And then just start to kind of get some of these shapes in here. And take a little pause there and see how everybody's getting on. Okay, so yeah, so just keep going on with what you're doing. It's, you know, it's really enjoyable, isn't it? Just to have a bit of a play. And there's actually not too much variation in these, to be fair. There's a few darker lines in and through, but you don't get really too many highlights on that. I think it's underneath everything. So we're, you know, we're observing those things as well. And we can work on, you know, working the darker ones. You know, it's nice to have a practice, but you can also, you know, just pick something up from your garden as well. I think the difference is, obviously, it gives you a different colours, very much so. And also, you know, as the flowers open, they change shape quite a lot. We had some bluebells in class this morning, and they really changed. These little tiny bluebells opened right up, because obviously they weren't competing for light like they would be in a natural woody environment or in a big cluster. So they looked like a completely different flower when they were open up. Really interesting to see. That's something to do if, you know, if you are working from life as well, and then it all starts to change. You almost get a photograph whilst you're working. So like if it does change, you can remember. Yeah. So I'm just going to look at the shadowy areas in here. Just kind of moving these lovely colours, aren't we, around the page, really, with the water. is the joy of expressing ourselves with our, especially our hand movement, everything, the way we apply the paint is really quite a joy. When you think, you know, how our very natural state, right from being really tiny, is to try and create mark making, you know, whether we're scrawling with chalk on a pavement or making marks in the sand in its very simple form. It's so important to be able to, you know, use that expression. And naturally, because, you know, when we're little, when we're doing that, we're just totally, you know, immersed in it, aren't we? It's not any different now. At all, actually. I always think of it, it's like, you know, how education has changed. It's the same with art, really. You know, obviously there was a time where you were made to write with your right hand, and that very natural movement with, you know, of writing left-handed was just, you know, you just weren't able to do it. Must have been really, really difficult. And so unnatural, really. And obviously nobody would ever dream of saying that now. It's the same thing, you know, if you're trying to make someone produce something in a certain way that's really not natural, it just doesn't feel right at all. This is a bit dried off a bit, so I'm just going to go in with a few colours in here, which you can do as well, you know, if your colours are drying off a bit or whatever. So yeah, I mean, just keep still going around, and then obviously enjoying doing it. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I've done this quite tightly, but you can kind of go in and go super loose. You could do like, just pop in some water there. Let's go in with your colour. I'm going to go in with the watercolour here. It's dried already. I'll just loosen it down, that watercolour itself. And then you can kind of just go in just like that. Drops of water. No outline at all. And just drop in something into the centre. Let it kind of bleed out a bit. You can go really loose like that. And then just pop a series of those together. It's getting a bit too thick. So many ways of doing it. But yeah, so that's just this with no outline at all. And there you go. So again, you can go in with the pencil. You can get that kind of nice fine line, I have to say, when you use a pencil, that kind of like push it in and out. I might do that. It's quite mottly, isn't it? It's almost velvety, I think. What I'd say. Get that kind of velvety feel, don't you? With pansies, I love those. That it's. I mean, they are, aren't they? They're velvety for a touch. It's how you kind of leave some of these light bits in, isn't it? Or do you draw them in so that you go round them? Really pretty, aren't they? Yeah, so we're taking a lot in here with them. You get this very white bit around the pansy edge as well. So just making sure that we leave that bit there so we can see. See that on the way. Yeah, so you can be quite precise, you know, with these really tiny areas, can't you? It's quite white in there. With the pencil, you can just go straight in. Very dark in there, isn't it? Overlaying with the colour. You can just go in with a brush, you know, and just kind of drop it in, make that wet, and then just drop that in the centre. But you're never quite sure where it's going to go when you do that. But it's fun sometimes just doing that. As long as you think, right, it is an experiment, it could just go all over, and accept that, then that's fine. Just kind of had to play with it. Yeah, so we just got to decide, haven't we, what kind of colours we put in there. It's very dark. Very dark. So yeah, so like I was saying, you know, it's just, do you put a, you know, how another colour you want to put with that? So I'm going to go with that really dark blue there. And this one. So it does give us a certain amount of, you know, control of what we're doing, because we can get these tiny fine lines in that we might struggle with pencil. But then, you know, we can just pull that beautiful colour, you know, pull some of these colours out as well that we've made marks with. Just with water. See what happens. But yeah, some beautiful colours in there. Absolutely beautiful. Yeah, and you can go up a bit, obviously, go up a size with your brush as well. They're quite dark, aren't they? They're very blue, almost bluish, purple in places. So again, you know, we're just experimenting with mixing some colours up to get the tone that we want. And building it as we go as well. Nothing wrong with starting with a slightly lighter one so that you've got, you know, some of those areas that are a bit lighter in place. That's where the leaves feel like they're folded a bit as well when we get the light ones on. And then we can work into it a bit more and a bit more. And again, we can push some of the darker colours around. It feels a bit more blue in an area, get that on, you know, we just can just do all sorts to it really, can't we? It's really quite lovely. can feel a bit disjointed when you know, when you're adding all these colours. But then it comes together, as we know it does. Yeah, so just building up these colours. And it's just nice, it just pauses in. And again, you know, it's a comparison, so we can always add some darker colours in there as well. You know, if we think, oh, actually that needs to be slightly dark, whatever, we can just kind of go in and do that. You know, and then we just obviously keep looking at some of the colours that we can see and go back in with a pencil, or you can stick with what you've got. Put some of these shapes in. And again, you know, we just go and darken off, you know, so if we've got to see some areas that are a bit more shadowy, we can just pop some of these colours. Just darken the areas off. That's the beauty of it. You know, we're working from light to dark. We can just get a bit more kind of definition in there. So I'm just dropping this bit green, but yeah, I mean, all of the flowers we can just add bits, take bits off, leave the white. We can even darken the areas around, you know, if you've got a white section there, we can even darken the bits around those white areas to make them even more pronounced. So many ways of doing things, but it's just really nice to get in there, isn't it? So I'll pause there so I can see how we're all getting on.